Hello and welcome to today's video, rambling video. The board only looks like this when I'm going to start bullshitting you and talk to you about something. So, the big talk around town, right, is the whole streaming thing, LTA North or LTA in general, suggesting, hey, we're going to have teams be allowed to scrim on stream. Historically, this has not been something teams do. We're seeing many players, former and current, come out with their opinions. Um, in part, a lot of this probably has to do with the stream teams and content creation teams that are essentially being born in the last couple years and getting high viewership and even higher viewership than your regular run of the mill teams that we're used to seeing play on stage. So, what's the deal here? Well, I think personally that this is a great thing to do. I don't think it's actually something that has many negative effects. There's a couple reasons for this. One, from what I read, it didn't seem like a requirement, so you aren't required as a team to scrim and stream them. So, with that in mind, it's still optional, and some teams can and some teams can't. And also, it goes back to what I've said for the last couple of years that teams need to be more transparent with their fan bases. They have to engage their fan bases more. Now, this first split to me, and I keep saying it, I think it is scrimming on stage because this first stand and fearless draft do not impact worlds. And so how do I look at it? I look at it as, well, teams can play all this different shit on stage where the games matter a bit more than scrims and still treat it like scrims and like, hey, because it's fearless draft, we are forced to try different things. And that's what scrims are supposed to be for anyways. It's supposed to be trying to try different things. And that is where I can see the argument for not wanting to stream your scrims because, hey, I am trying things. I do not want my opponent this week knowing this is what I'm trying to do. Now, I think that is a very fair argument to be had. I think that if teams do enough research and their due diligence, they could look at your solo queue and say, hey, this player is playing this champion. It's kind of fringe meta right now. We don't know. I mean, we haven't seen it much. Is it something this player hasn't played it much? But hell, they're playing it a lot this week. There is a chance that they're going to play it this week. And given the coaching staffs, etc., they should be doing that research and already be prepared for it. But I could see an argument for saying, hey, if I'm streaming my scrims, they're going to see me play it on because that's the next step, right? Solo queue is the first step, scrims is the second step, stage is the final one. And, I think I've even heard, I forget who said it, that sometimes it takes up to 6 months for a champion that's been buffed to hit stage because teams can be so slow on incorporating it into their compositions and being comfortable with it. And that, I think, is part of the problem with league in general, the unwillingness to try different things. And in part, I mean, there's money on the line. As a team, as a coach, as players, there's money, there's your job, your career on the line. So you don't want to just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks on stage. And that's what scrims are for, is to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And both teams are doing it. And if you can find a couple teams that you can respect and say, hey, I know that these teams respect this process in the same way I do and want similar things out of it, I can scrim these guys and know that it's going to be fruitful. Versus maybe, you've heard of some teams just int scrims, play uncharacteristically and, waste your time, essentially. And you don't want that, right? Another thing that I thought about when I'm thinking about streaming scrims, other games do it. I feel like Optic used to do it in COD. I'm sure many other teams did as well. As somebody that is still an Optic fan in general, that was huge. The ability to scrim on stream allowed fans to get a little bit of an insight in what was happening. Now, of course, in a game like Call of Duty, there aren't as many different, you know, there aren't as many surprises, if you will. There are not as many opportunities for surprises or to play the game all that different than another team that maybe, hell, it's not like bringing out a whole new composition or a couple champions that players aren't prepared for on the opposite side. Like, imagine if FlyQuest were streaming their scrims and they were playing Nunu at Worlds. Well, you think Gen G would have been prepared for it? I would say so. So the the double-edged sword here of, well, there are positives and there are negatives, but in the end, the most important thing is it is not required. It is not required. It is optional. So, people can get upset all they want, but it's up to the team in the end, and there might not be many teams that want to do it. But I will say this, the teams that do it are going to see an uptick in viewership. They're going to see an uptick in fan engagement. And that's one area where league teams struggle terribly, in my opinion. It is awful. It is absolutely awful. Like, I talk about Vivo Keith Stars because I give Seal a ton of credit because he is open and transparent with his fans, with the team's community. And that, like, you gotta do that. You gotta take the time to do that. And this is just part of it. Is streaming your scrims is just part of that. And hell, does this end up becoming a situation where, there becomes 4 steps to this process? Where you're playing solo queue and then you're willing to stream scrims with the things you're taking from solo queue and then saying, okay, now what we take from streaming scrims, we will put into our regular scrims and then go and play games on stage. You may say, well, there's not enough time for that. Well, it depends how much you're scrimming and what you're getting out of those scrims, and also what we're getting out of solo queue. Actually, LOL Esports and streaming, the fact that these players completely threw away and that Champions Queue was a blessing, and the players just threw it away. They threw it away. And, that was terrible. That was terrible. Being able to stream that was huge. Like, personally, like, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot. Players keep shooting themselves in the foot. They really do. And older players, I understand. They probably view scrims in a different way than players even do now. It just... You need fan engagement. You need to make people want to care about players. Like, I'll be honest, I don't have time for content in that I don't watch content. And that's not to say there aren't great content creators out there, because I am somebody that creates content. It's just that I don't have fucking time to be watching other people's shit. But also, as far as teams are concerned, there is no team to me that makes me want to go watch their content. To be like, I will set aside time to watch this. There's nobody. Nobody like Optic used to be for me years ago. And Optic still does today. That's why they are such a massive fucking brand. You may say, yeah, well, they're not the biggest brand. There's this brand's bigger and that brand's bigger. This team's been around for how long at this high of a level? Like, it's just, there's really, it's such low effort being done by, like, low effort isn't the right word. The words to describe it, because they may be given a lot of effort, they just don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, they don't know how to do this. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing that these teams have put themselves even into a position that some are even thinking that this is an indication that league is dying. No. Other esports that are still alive and kicking do stuff like this. Um, and and also, hell, think about it this way too, like player interactions. Like that's why Champions Queue was such a big opportunity for players to build their brands. That was such a big opportunity. I mean, I'm not going to go watch a player play. Like I said, I don't watch content. I don't watch teams content. And I don't watch player content, really. But I did watch Champions Queue. From my perspective, watching players interact with each other, being able to hear their comms or lack thereof, players that normally don't play together and just seeing how they vibe was something that I really enjoyed. I thought that was a really nice thing to see. And that's part of why I think scrims could be cool to see on stream too, because hey, you're seeing their comms, you're seeing how this team operates, and the whole communication part of it. And yeah, other teams are going to see that, but I mean, you're already probably like I said, some of these teams are probably already making content where it's like, well, actually, it's not about some. I mean, they do, right? You have X team, Y team going to put out a video the day after the games are done saying, oh, these are the, comms from this past week, like hot mic and this, that, and the third. And it's like, okay, well, why not just stream and do that also? Or at the very least, it gets to another point about players and contracts and things. I think back to Optic, and I believe Optic didn't take any money from players streaming, and said, "Hey, make your money. I'm going to pay you this much, but you gotta build a brand yourself." And then when players got bigger than what the team could afford, they had built themselves up to the point where they could go find another team and become bigger than that, be able to stream, be able to do this, be able to do that. It's like, I don't know, it's just like, I don't want to have to do the extra work. And that's why League is dying viewership wise in some areas, because of the lack of willingness to just engage the community. And I understand it's a really fucking toxic community. That I see 100%. You'd be like, oh, well, players are going to get worried they're going to get flamed and this and that. And it's like, okay, well, you've been playing this damn game for how long? You know what it is. You've been dealing with it all the time. You mute chat in game, you mute chat on stream. That's what you do. It's what you do. I mean, or the players, hell, the players don't even watch. Like, when there's a scrim, why would a player even be watching the chat? Like, let's just say, hypothetically, a team like, I don't know, I think Fly is pretty open to wanting to stream their scrims. Fly does it from their channel, and now the players aren't even looking at the chat. There's somebody that's moderating the chat that's from FlyQuest, and that's that, and they're not even watching it. Yeah, well, they'll flame them on Twitter. They've been DMing them crap for years, and it does not make it right. It's obviously not right. It's not a good thing that people do it. I'm just thinking, it's not going to be much different than it already is. And the benefits outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. It's just, teams should be willing to do this. Their fan engagement absolutely sucks for the most part. Their content sucks for the most part. There are just a few times where I can say, oh, wow, that's some really good freaking content. And it just, players that don't want to do this, once again, I feel like when I look at the Venn diagram of like Champions Queue and teams and players that aren't going to want to do this, I'm going to find a lot of people in the middle that didn't want to do anything on stream, and they don't feel comfortable on stream, And it's like, well, this is your job. This is part of your job. At this point, this has to be part of your job. If you want, like, if you're in your early 20s, you're making a shit ton of money, but once that money goes away, you need to have a job. Most of you aren't being educated, beyond a high school diploma, if that, for some. And that's not to say you have to do that, but I'll say this. I don't know how many of these gamers have, traits that would do well in the trades either. So, I mean, maybe you do have a plumber and an electrician and an engineer and a carpenter on your team. Maybe you do. Maybe those guys will be able to do that, and it's no big deal. But I just have an inkling that the majority of these players do not have those traits to do those jobs. So, in your early 20s, you need to be willing to build a brand that supersedes your career and allows you to have a career after the one you have now. There's a reason why the players, after their careers, are still talked about, that people still watch, because they did the work during their career to earn that second one. Well, I'll just stream solo queue and this and that. Yeah, to like 200 viewers, and you're going to be saying this, that, and the third about how are living in a fucking apartment when you could have had a house. Or you could have done this, or you could have had this or that, because you chose to not do what you needed to do during your career to build that fan base yourself. This goes beyond teams. This is a player problem as much as it is a team problem. I lack sympathy for when shit hits the fan and it's like, well, this player, they had a great career, or they had let's say this great career, you probably could flip it. You probably go from a great career to being something. But let's say you had a mid career, and no one knows really who you are. Because you were average. No one talked about you actually as a bad player. And no one talked about you as being a good player. You're just forgettable. And it's like, you're forgettable probably because you're not doing what needs to get done to make yourself memorable. And I'm not, who the fuck am I? I'm just a guy as well that just puts, hell, I got a whiteboard with 3 words on it and a plus sign, right? I mean, and I just keep grinding, putting in the effort. And it's just, some people I feel like just don't want to put in the effort. They just shoot themselves in the foot. They hear an idea, the players wanting this and that, and it's like, you want it, go get it. If you truly want it, you'll go get it. Streaming your scrims is going to be part of that. Streaming your solo queue is part of that. Not blowing Champions queue was part of that. Just from my perspective, anyways. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I don't have enough time. Then that becomes a team problem. And I mean, 2 years ago, I think I made some really crappy video on my board about how to try and allocate time to try and make it so teams were very transparent with their fans and also were able to get things done from more of a traditional sports perspective and how to interact with media. And it's just that should be done. I still feel like that should be done. I mean, I don't know many of these players' personalities or anything, and I don't really care to. And it's not to say I don't think that these players probably do have a personality, but for most of them, they just don't do the work to make it known. And now they want to fight against this. It's no good. So thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, become a YouTube supporter, and hope to see you again tomorrow.